Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of I Have Something to Say. I'm very excited to bring on the show Marisol Medina and Felipe Robayo. They are the co-founders of AMÉRICA. It's a publication's been around here in Central Florida for 2 years. I just want to say, when, now we're venturing out into public spaces and stuff, and a mutual friend of Marisol and I's conducted like an anniversary party for her company. She's also an entrepreneur. And it's so cool because we went and Marisol and I had never met in person. And when you meet people, right, Marisol, and I know you from a past life, or and it was just like that immediate connection. And then in talking, we discovered that we have this background in publishing, and in magazines specifically. And so we started already talking about, our love and passion for print publications and that transformation. And she's like, oh my God, you need to meet Felipe. We've been at this for 2 years. And I want to start off by just congratulating you, because I know that AMÉRICA, the magazine that you produce, it's on a monthly basis, right? It's you reached a major milestone of 10,000 copies distributed here in Central Florida, and so bravo! I'm very excited for that, and welcome to this conversation. There's a lot that I want to talk to you about. It's really stems from that initial 2.5 hours that we spent together, and we were like glue, right? Just talking, ignoring everybody else in the room, and now I, get to meet Felipe also, and just wanted to, talk about, why AMÉRICA? Why did you decide to launch this publication, and feel that it was the right moment? And, it takes a lot of guts to do this, because print, as we know, has suffered a lot in terms of being a medium that people considered viable once the internet and people embraced, right, online content. And so why AMÉRICA? Why print? Why Central Florida? And your thoughts on this shift in mindset in terms of print publishing versus online publishing. I know it's a lot there, but I know your expertise and that you're good with what you do.
Thank you. So I'll go first, and then I'll let Felipe answer the question also in his own way, because we both have a lot of things to say. So I think that's the main reason why we decided to do the magazine. We had just moved back to Orlando. Felipe is an author, and I had a background as a journalist. I went to school to be a journalist. So we definitely had a way with words and a lot of things to say, and didn't really have jobs lined up. We both looked for jobs in the communications industry as writers, and the Orlando Sentinel wasn't hiring at that time. I don't think they're hiring anymore at all anymore. But we looked for that route. We felt like it just wasn't going to be. It wasn't going to solve our immediate needs. So we just decided. We got to thinking, okay, well, let's do this. We saw a magazine that was operating somewhere else, and we thought that it could be a good model to bring over to Miami. And we relied a lot on Felipe's experience, because he was producing a magazine in Colombia before. So this wasn't something that was his first rodeo. So we decided to, let's do this. We believe in the power of print. We think that while it is true that magazines at a national level have suffered, um, I think that when it comes to like a micro local level, magazines are very strong still, and we see that in the local magazines wherever you go. We went to St. Augustine recently, and the first thing we did was pick up the magazine there to kind of give us a sense of where we were at and where we could go, and that was very helpful. And it wouldn't have been the same if we just looked at TripAdvisor, you know.
Mhm.
So that's the short answer. That's my short answer. I'll let Felipe answer what he thinks.
Um, yeah, well, as we were talking earlier, basically magazines have definitely died in terms of the of how vibrant and long reach and then the amount of magazines that are out there. I mean, it's not as saturated as before, but they're not. But they've revived in the hyper local level, and they will remain there for a good while. And also for the need for niches. So whenever there's a niche for a community, a race, or a specific neighborhood, there's going to be a possibility of a magazine, of a print publication, because it becomes a reference point for the community, and it becomes also a point of conversation for everyone. Now, it's also an element of complicity. We started the magazine because I hadn't been in the States for the last 8 years. After I graduated university, Florida State University, I went back to Colombia and I started teaching at Universidad del Valle. Universidad del Valle was my house for 8 years. I taught there English and writing, hosted some creative writing workshops, and coming to the United States, the experience was like nothing. And I was kind of resilient and reluctant to go back to teaching. I wanted to explore more the writing industry and the publishing industry as a means of like full on living. So that was part of it. It's taken a lot of sacrifices, but that's the thing. We I didn't find anything on the writing industry because of the lack of background, like in the states, and we we were always looking at magazines, and we looked at one from Miami. It was a smaller one. It was more on advertising, and we said, oh well, we might be able to do something like this. We explored the market in Orlando and didn't really see any magazines, and it wasn't after like 2 months of publication that we found out that there were actually other two magazines, but these guys come out every 2 months with like 5,000 copies, and yeah, it's very limited. So yeah, it's been naive also. Like we started in a naive way, like no, we're gonna put this out in the market. People are gonna love it. Everybody's gonna come in. Look, there are like thousands of businesses here. If we, so under that scheme of thoughts, the greater scheme of thoughts of things is that we have 1,000 businesses. We can get 5% of that. We can
Mhm.
get 5% of that. Good. And that's where we're heading to. Yeah, right now. And it's been very interesting. It's been very hard. Marisol's been in charge of the digital side, how the magazine looks on Instagram and Facebook and the website. She's tried out like doing some newsletters, and I've been in charge of the physical side, um, like putting it together, design, layout, and then a lot of the writing, but also the muscle work, the sweat work, which is just putting it in the streets, putting it on the streets. So that's been very interesting, because the magazine's it's a key to people's hearts. It's a key
Mhm.
to the owner of the business,
Mhm.
and that's something that we didn't really know. And it's very cool. It's very cool because it's in line with our main intention, which is create a community.
Yeah.
That was also part of the reason that we were new to Orlando, and we wanted to feel like we wanted to have a way to connect with other Hispanics in the area. And we figured, we could do two things at once, like have a business and a source of income, and also connect with others, and also create a space to host a community. And I think we're on our way to doing that. There's always room for improvement, but we're starting.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I was so impressed, by you. And then I saw the publication. I'm like, wow, that, and it's like you say, you don't see a lot of dedicated Latino, focused publications in this region. And when you look at the numbers, like in Orange County alone, it's like one out of every three people are identify as Latino, right? So it's like the numbers are huge. And so I think we're going to see more and more, people embrace what you're doing. And I love that that's your focus, right? America. I love when I saw the title and I saw the header of the magazine. I'm like, America with the accent. And I'm like, yeah, it really helps ground also this notion that America is the entire hemisphere, right?
You got it.
People
You
talk
got it.
yes. People normally talk about America, right? And they think US only. But I mean, we're talking from Canada all the way to, Patagonia and Argentina, like the tippy tip. And so to really have a space to celebrate all of that, I think is fantastic, and I know that it's because, I know, Felipe, you mentioned that, you worked in Colombia, right? So it's not like this idea of, back home. No, you were just there. Like have had a career over there. You've done your studies here. I know, for example, Marisol, you were born in Colombia, and then you've, did your studies and you've lived here, a long period of time too. So it's like this um, dual experience, right? Where your heart is really split into two because you're very much American, like US American, but you're also very much Latino American, right? And so then how do you mash that
I'm Colombian,
into
Colombian all the way.
yeah, into like this Colombia, yeah, I know, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's like that
Yeah.
our hearts are elsewhere half of the
Yeah.
time because of this emotional connection to our roots and our countries. And I know, for example, everything something happens in Puerto Rico, that's disastrous or horrific, I like we feel it over here, also, and I know that the same with you. And I know Colombia is such a beautiful country, a rich history. I mean, just like, and very powerful. You have a lot of natural resources too, right? That are the envy of any country really worldwide, because you have such a large expansion, territorial expansion too. Education, is really high too in Colombia. It's so funny because there's always this competition of who speaks the best Spanish, right? And Colombia is really up there, in terms of the way you have a lot of value in education. You put a lot of value in education. That's admired, like all other Latino American countries admire that, of your country. Cafe. Coffee's always been, the biggest thing that we try to rival on, and it's a healthy, I feel, a rivalry, even with Puerto Rico, for example, that we're proud of our coffee crops, but Colombia, it's like, whoa, like a big worldwide world recognized producer of coffee. And so I just wanted to also focus on that, right, on how you feel about representing your heritage, doing justice to Colombia, as sons, as a son and daughter of Colombia, and how do you see this work, this entrepreneurship work, and its impact in what you can do to bridge some kind of awareness of what's going on back home?
Yeah. We we've been really paying attention to what's been going on in Colombia, and trying to stay as current as we can with every development. But it's inevitable that once you're no longer in the country, um, your mind is not 100% there anymore. Because you have all the other issues from this other country where you're currently at, taking up space in your mind. Like we were very before the elections, we were consumed entirely with like everything that was going on here in this country.
Yeah.
And for the past 2 years or so, but when Felipe was in Colombia, and especially Felipe, because he's been most politically active and politically educated when it comes to the situation in Colombia, between the two of us, he he was very much active. He was, when we were there in 2018, he was going to marches and demonstrations, and before the pandemic hit, um, it was all still there. Like there was a social commotion that was starting to burst, and the pandemic kind of just put a lid on that for a while. But when our current president decided to present a new tax reform, just made everything erupt, and that's what we're seeing now happening in Colombia with the demonstrations, the response on the part of the government with brutal force, trying to repress everything. We've had there's about 500 or something. I think that the number is much bigger now, but those figures are never very clear. 500 or so people that have gone missing. Um, We've had very, very separate things happening, body parts showing up in rivers, people showing up dead in just random corners or in rivers. It's like they dump your body in the river. So we are returning to a state of violence that I don't think any Colombian wishes to return to, but we're terribly divided now with what's going on, and the two polar opposites right now is either with the government and you are against the strike, or you're with the strike and you're against the government. So it's like you can't be anywhere in between.
Yeah.
But we've been trying to be very very mindful of that. Felipe knows a lot more about what's been going on.
Yeah,
So
how does this tax increase, and what is it exactly, is it on products and services, on imports, or is it on everything? And how does it affect the day to day, of the Colombian people?
Well, all right. So the increment of the tax called IVA. This was something that was just a detonator for towards the marches and towards the protests. When I was in Colombia back in 2018, we started the protests. We started the protests in October 2018. It went over till February 2019. It continued throughout the whole year of 2019, and then it was continuing rolling over on 2020 by February when the pandemic hit. This was the only moment that the government of Colombia was able to put the people back into their houses. However, when they were able to do that, since they went ahead and closed the economy completely, they just plummeted the country into a spiral of poverty. So we're at 46 last time I checked, 46% poverty rate, increased from 20%. So it's like 26 extra points. Don't overquote me on the exact data, but
Mm-hmm.
the IVA basically meant this was just a detonator. In Colombia, we don't pay a tax on rent because not everybody has enough property, and not everybody has enough taxable income. So what they do is that they create the tax for consumption to compensate for the tax that they can't take from people that are working.
Mm-hmm.
So what they do is they put it at, right now is at 19%, but not on
high.
every product. What the government was trying to do was to put it on 90% on every product.
Mm.
So products that were just covered, let's say subsidized by the government, that meant having no tax, like eggs, milk, meat. We
Coffee.
also have sugar, right? Coffee, right? Coffee. So all of those became taxable at a 20% taxable event. So that's pretty big. Every 100,000 pesos or every $100, $20 goes to government in consumption.
Wow.
But again, there's a problem of we call it illegal economy. The illegal economy is not the narco economy, and that's another one, and that's well set in the government. I would have to say we have a
It's
narco
like an
paramilitary
underground. It's
state
like an
in Colombia.
underground economy. Underground, like an underground economy.
Or like
Yeah.
the
No,
informal economy.
no, no. The economy is called el rebusque. Yeah, the rebusque is you go find however you can your means of subsistence. So people will go to the supermarket, they'll buy like a pound of flour, and they'll start cooking arepas in the corner, and
Mm.
that's how they make their income. Yeah, so pretty much. So this is informal. It's called the informal economy, and the
Mhm.
informal economy doesn't pay taxes. That's why that's why the government decides to put or tax at 19% consumption, because that's where they're going to try to compensate. But this informal economy, of course, doesn't follow guidelines. They're easy to close. They are subject to government regulations that emerge one day to the next. There was a scandal about a year ago about how a person went to jail for selling empanadas. And then we have what we have in Colombia. To summarize it really strongly, is that we have a feudalistic system that is a narco paramilitary, yeah, and that is able to put people in power by buying votes. This is their reality. This is why they're killing people in Colombia. And in Colombia, also, you can't be a social leader. You can't be a social leader. You can't tell what's missing in the countryside, because they'll kill you. They've killed so far 400, almost 400 social leaders this year alone. And since Duque came into power, this man reactivated violence. He reactivated violence by saying that he was going to shred the peace agreements. Now, right now, you ask, what if we need to ask the community about something? What would it be? I would say, don't buy Colombian coffee. Colombian coffee hasn't really made the Colombian economy emerge. Right now, if you go to the to the coffee plantations in Colombia, our farmers are still taking the coffee out in donkeys, because we don't have any streets. We don't have any sort of development. So the coffee that is supposedly our main resource of
Mhm.
revenue and richness in our country
Mhm.
is actually putting us really down in poverty, a lot of
Yeah.
poverty. And also, Colombia has to continue on fracking and an oil economy, which is very
Mhm.
similar to Venezuela. Venezuela depends deeply on oil, and now Colombia depends deeply on oil. And now the problem has been that the taxes on the oil companies like Ecopetrol, they have subsidies. So gas is federally backed or
Mm.
governmentally backed. And but the consumer is still paying the highest price of gasoline almost all of Latin America. So that's our problem. We have a problem where we have a few people that grasp power. They are feudal type. We call them gamonales. The gamonales are the new feudalistic powers that exist in Colombia, and they have existed for forever. They've never left. There has never been a true democracy in Colombia, sadly.
Mhm.
Look, when I
Mhm.
talk about Colombia like this, I'm not talking about the country. The country is beautiful. Whenever I go there, I go to the rivers. I go to the ocean. I love the mountain. I love all of our tropical forests. I love our animals. I love just how it feels the breeze at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'm
Mhm.
just so sad and ripped apart by the fact when I was teaching at Univalle, they sent us a letter threatening us with our lives. Las Águilas Negras de Bacrim.
Mhm.
They threatened to kill us if we didn't stop talking. But you say that we have the highest rate of education. If that's true, that's so sad. That's so sad that in Latin America it's that
Mhm.
bad. Because in Colombia, the ones that are getting the true education are people that, like us, we were able to go to
People who can
private
afford
school, and private school is pretty good, but public education is definitely, there's something called, so you know a bit, it's called educación nueva.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what they do is that they integrate from first to sixth grade in the rural areas, the grades, so they integrate them into one. You have one
Mm-hmm.
teacher teaching kids from 7 years old until 13 years old what topic. So it's similar like the Tom Sawyer schools, Huckleberry Finn schools back here in the South. And these gamonales, these feudal powers, they maintain power by keeping the war alive. They're the most interested in keeping the war alive. Cocaine is the ones that's producing the most money to these people in power. That's the reality. It's not coffee. I wish, I wish coffee was doing it, but probably sell coffee really cheap to Juan Valdez. I'm sorry, to Starbucks. Starbucks is probably reaping in more profit than all of Colombia just on its own
Yeah.
coffee. So we have a big problem in Colombia. The big problem in Colombia is that we treat it as if it were a piece of land, no man's land, or actually a one man's land who says what people can do there. And what he says that they can do there, or what they say they can do there, is grow some cows, grow some cocaine or some coca leaves, and don't allow the government to come in here. And let's just say we need national security. That's the reality in Colombia. We're living violence. We're living right wing guerrillas right now
Mm-hmm.
are killing us. Right wing guerrillas are killing us.
Mm-hmm. And so
Paramilitary
my
forces.
question is, because I hear you, right? And I think that's the worry here. So I mean, about here on the US, mainland. It's like I'm hearing you, and obviously this didn't happen overnight, right? I mean, it's like you say, these this mentality and these forces and these interests have been there, right? All the time. But then, you know, is it I don't know. Moving the masses, right? And having people, because these people, I mean, are the current leaders voted in, but it's like you say, it's not really a true democracy. And so I'm hearing you say this, right? And it's like votes and interests are basically maneuvered and manipulated, right?
Yeah,
And so then I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh my God, this is what
there's
we're
proof.
going on here, right? With the voting
There's
rights
proof
and all
of
of that.
Duque.
Mm-hmm.
There's proof of Duque being elected with bot votes, and how illegitimate he is. And the problem is that he has no government program, no state program, because all he's doing is just a 4-year program where he wants to destroy the peace agreements. Why? Oh, because in Colombia we have this mentality: say, oh, we gave the country to las FARC. Man, that is such a small and short-sighted way of seeing it.
And
Mm,
explain las FARC.
no,
Explain
actually,
that. Mm-hmm.
yeah, las FARC means Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
FAC means Fuerzas Armadas de Colombia. So FAC is the military and FARC is the guerrilla force. So the guerrilla force has been in power for about 60 years. And these guys took over a large portion of land of Colombia. So much so that they could call that side a FARC Colombia.
Right.
And in that side of Colombia, there is no government presence whatsoever, either because FARC wouldn't allow it, right? Or because the government wouldn't be willing to also integrate that side of the countryside. So FARC has been in power for 60 years, and the Colombian government, with its military forces, which is one of the strongest in Latin America, hasn't been able to do anything against them at all. Why? Because they have the employ guerrilla tactics of fighting, so they're probably not going to be in the same spot. They're probably going to attack at a moment where they're not expecting it. When they attack, they move. They're not attacking together, all of them, right? So it's impossible to beat a guerrilla force in Colombia, where it's huge, masses of
Mm-hmm.
land, and they can just be anywhere. So these guys were able to just gain so much power and control over certain territories. So what happened was that Uribe was trying to reach the peace agreements. Álvaro Uribe, and not only him, from Gaviria from 1991, when the Constitution of Colombia, was uh, written down by both the state and the M19 forces, which were which who just had immobilized from had just given away their guns, and they went into institutional power. You see, in Colombia, the problem is that there's been a lack of representation of the countryside. There is no representation in the countryside, and in the '60s, when they killed Gaitan by '49, there was 10 years of period of violence, very, very bad violence. There was just conservador versus liberal, blue versus red. If you're red and I'm blue, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. That's all. You, because you're bad. And this went on for 10 years. It's a period of time where it's very dark in Colombia. And after
Mhm.
that came in a Frente Nacional. The Frente Nacional is basically a ping pong of power between the conservative and liberal political
Movements. Yeah, political
parties.
movements. Uh-huh. Hmm.
So these guys stayed 16 years doing that, and then came in Rojas Pinilla, which is a dictator, a right wing dictator like Pinochet.
Mm.
So what happened there was that there was no representation on the countryside whenever they did Frente Nacional. So this guy Marulanda, which was the founder of FARC, said, "Okay, you guys aren't representing us. We're arming ourselves," and that's how it was born. And they
Mm.
went to the countryside. They went to the selva, and that's where they
The
started.
forest. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. The
Now,
jungle. Hmm.
I'm not. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying FARC are good, bad. No, these guys were looking for political representation. They didn't find it in the institution. They went to it to get it by arms.
Hmm.
And this continued until today. This continued until 2016 with the sign of the peace
A
agreements.
peace agreement. Yeah. Hmm.
And the peace agreements were signed, of course, in Havana, where there is, let's say, a neutral territory between what would be these left groups and the right wing groups. And of course, that's like a slap in the face for a lot of people in power in Colombia. So they don't like that. They didn't like that. They want war. They need the war. They
Yeah,
need the
for the
war.
right.
If they don't have the war, they have no place in government, because all they
Right.
offer is national security. But
Hmm.
you don't need national security, uh, or there is not only one wave towards national security. National security is not only attained by arms and guns and bullets; it's
Right.
also by dialogue.
And is that more of the right wing posture? The
Yes,
arms. Yes. Okay. So
right now, yes, because FARC de-armed themselves, but
right.
media, Caracol, RCN, Semana, which are the mainstream media uh, outlets and the place where people are getting their information the most from, these guys are highly proselitists. So they're constantly saying, no, these guys, FARC dissidents is emerging again, these bandalos. So what they did is that with the marches, they put a blanket term over everybody that was participating in the march, and they called them bandalos. And
Right.
not only that, they call it terrorismo vandálico.
Right. So
Vandalic
they called the
terrorism.
vandalism. Yeah, vandalism and terrorists.
So
Hmm.
what they do there is what they're actually doing is that they're creating a legality to capture them and treat them as terrorists. And
Right.
if they kill them, then they can say, "Ah, no, he was a vándalo, he was a
Right.
terrorist."
Right.
And this is called falsos positivos in Colombia. This is the new modality of falsos positivos.
False
The
positive.
false positives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah,
So so I mean, now I understand the conversation we were having, ¿verdad, Marisol?
Yeah.
When we met about the concern with what's, happening here too. And so it's like how can media, how do you see yourselves, as instruments of change, in whatever capacity, because sometimes, I mean, the problems are so overwhelming, right? That we don't think sometimes, and I speak for myself in this instance. Is like we do a lot, myself and the people that I work with, and team up with community impact and trying to raise awareness. Even this podcast, right? We try to dar el granito de arena, a little pebble, right? And we're hoping that we're chipping away and help, bring awareness to these similarities too, right? In mindsets that are detrimental to democracy, to human rights, because I'm hearing, to human rights, to the preservation of truth, and integrity and safety and all of those basic human needs that doesn't matter if you're in Colombia, the US, or in Portugal, Asia. That really doesn't matter. That I think just people in general are looking for their societies to allow them to have access to in an equitable manner. And it just seems that if we can learn from what's happening in other places to try to avoid that here, but also try to come together to see how we can help support, in this case, the Colombian community here, because I'm sure that you're all going through this heartache and also frustration, if you will, of not seeing real change happen. But what can be done in your mind, all now, as media vehicles and people that work in this industry, to try to counter, right, the effects of what's happening now in this side of the world, in this hemisphere?
As Felipe mentioned, Colombia, we have the country really is very split, and it's also like a generational issue, because it really kind of depends how old you are. How old you are sort of determines what you think about the current situation. And it's pretty much the same as here. We see a lot of parallels between the what's going on right now in Colombia and what was going on here during the Black Lives Matter protests.
Mhm.
Sure, the same thing happened. The right wing media immediately started calling the Black Lives Matter protesters terrorists, all sorts of negative terms to try to take away from what they were truly trying to do, which was move forward this realization of deep racism that is embedded in this country. And in Colombia, our issues, yes, we have a lot of issues with race, but primarily it's like a political war, right?
Yeah, and socioeconomic status too. That's
Yeah,
where that's where the inequities lie, right? Yeah.
exactly. We are in Colombia. It's more like I feel like people tend to differentiate more between social status than they do race. But it definitely is there. I'm not. That's not to say that Colombia is not a racist country, because it very much is. With the um, the whites and the mestizos, and then the indigenous and the blacks.
Mhm.
We are
Yeah.
a melting pot. We have all sorts of races in Colombia.
Mhm.
We're all very different, and every region is different. But um, Felipe was talking about the national, or the big media conglomerates that we have in Colombia, pretty much all being cut with the same cord, and just pretty much all saying the same thing and having the same sort of opinions.
Mhm.
That has sparked a huge like revolution in terms of people saying, you know what, I really don't believe this BS they're saying on TV, or what they're saying here. It really isn't true. I'm gonna take a very proactive approach and start something. So we've seen uh, a lot of creation of new independent mediums
Good.
that are doing really, really great journalism, and they're getting the people to support them financially, which is also good, because they're not depending from big advertisers, which can influence what they're going to say.
Yeah.
So like a grassroots communication effort in trying to highlight different stories.
Yeah.
We see that through YouTubers, uh, Instagram accounts that just grow and become like some sort of digital newspaper. There's like a fact checking new website that just came out to debunk lies that are told through Twitter and things like that. And these are all really grassroots efforts. We have that here also. Fox News, we all know what Fox News is going to say. Like we see the current events, and then we know what their take on it is going to be before they even open their mouths, right?
Right.
And
Right. The spin. Yeah.
but the same thing goes for CNN, right? Like we have really polarized networks, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
um, we understand, our role. We sometimes debate on how much opinion we should input into our magazine, but I think that it really reflects us and what we think about political issues. We obviously have limitations in terms of how much space we have or how much time we have, uh, but we try to, especially Felipe with his editorial letter every month. He tries to talk about pressing issues that are going on, and really that's just his opinion,
Yeah.
And our covers are sometimes really like out there.
Yeah.
um, but we use it to express our opinion, and hopefully, people who read it feel the same. And even if they don't feel the same, they can call us out. They often do.
Yeah.
They don't like, okay, then we're communists or we're whatever.
Yeah.
But at least here we can feel safe printing our opinions and saying whatever we think. We're not thinking
Well,
that we're going to be assassinated.
for now anyway, but that's the
For now,
concern, right? But that's the concern.
Well,
And I feel and so I applaud you for taking, a stance and just being as authentic as you are able to be, because you are, just very authentic people, and being unapologetic and also fearless in creating something anew because you saw a void, and there is a void. I hope that this is also how do you say, an example, right? It's almost like creating this thought leadership in the print space, because you created something also out of a need. You know what? It's so similar. I heard you speak, and it took me back when I started my business 13 years ago. Is because I lost my job during the last recession, and I couldn't find work because here in Orlando is who you know, honestly, and so that was very, very difficult. And so then I said, with my husband, I said, that's it, we got to start our own business, because at this point, yo voy a mí, right? I mean, I know what I know how to do, and so here we go, and here we are 13 years later, and it was the best decision that we did, because it gives you this liberty, right, to be able to create your own path, and yes, it's hard at the beginning, but we get there. We know that we know what our vision is, and that direction that we want to take. And I know, Felipe, you wanted to say something. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, that's fine. I wanted to add a bit on what you were talking about the magazine, what Mary was saying, and is that yes, one of the intentions is to reveal and go against any sort of stereotypes that exist, to really kill the stereotype. That's one of the probably the biggest aspirations out there. Yeah, how do we kill the stereotype that we have of Mexicans, of Puerto Ricans, of Cubans, of Colombians, of Venezuelans? So what do we mean by a stereotype? Oh well, eh, Puerto Rican. Ah, ok. They like chinchorreo, they like la tripleta, and they like the rumba, perezoso, and they like la playita, coco logo, blah. Right?
Right.
And the Colombian, oh, coquero, amiguero, parce, right? And they think about the Peruvian, que el cholito. So we have this problem.
Yeah.
We have a huge problem that we continue to reinforce via the mainstream media. Of course, they're really good at it. They're really good at stereotyping, and that's their success, of course, and that's perfectly fine in terms of a business. But the impact it has in society, it definitely creates a divide.
Yeah.
So, my aspiration, at least a personal aspiration, is okay. How do we cut
Yeah.
these stereotypes? I know that we don't have that. We like That's also another element that we were looking for. Oh, so the stereotype is that we as Latin Americans, all we like is perreo, chisme, y fútbol.
Right.
Perreo, chisme, y fútbol, right?
Yeah.
And coca. That's all,
Yeah.
that's all
That's
Latinos like.
like what you're saying is like drugs, provocative dancing, gossip, right? And football and soccer. That's it, right? Those,
Right? It's like,
yeah,
yeah, it's pretty much, to summarize it in a phrase, is go get high, right? Go get high after the soccer game so they can talk about you in the farandula tomorrow. So that's all
exactly.
there's to it.
Yeah.
So that is very, very small. We're so
Yeah.
much more than that. And Mary and I, are a representation of another facet of Latin America, one that is
Yeah.
more in line with the hippie movement of the United States, one that is more in line with the European movement, of the youth, one that is more in line with calling ourselves Latin American more than
Mhm.
Hispanic American, because we're citizens
Yes.
of the world. We consider ourselves citizens of the world. We live here in the boondocks, but we operate in Central Florida, and we reach the world.
Yeah. That's awesome. I couldn't wrap it up any better. Can I tell you? And this is a room for another episode. So I worked in the media industry, as I mentioned before, for 11 years here in the US, based out of New York, with Latino publications, with people in Espanol grammar. And I used to meet with all of these Latino owned agencies. Okay. And I got to tell you that now they're all crying and like, oh my God, all the media dollars are going to black, campaigns and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, because the black community has not ever thought of business not being also part of their social impact and social activism, where a lot of Latino media agencies here based out of the US, in my opinion, okay, have perpetuated, okay, colorism, in our communities, and also classism, right? This class structure through the telenovelas, and also not wanting
Somewhere.
to integrate also, because I used to meet with them and I used to say, hey, what about, I used to back then sell a publication that was in English, but it was in culture. It was for the Latino audiences of the New York Post. And they're like, no, 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 that we only do Spanish only, Spanish only. I'm like, but dude, you don't watch Univision anymore. You don't watch Telemundo. You're more mainstream, and you're freaking Latino. And so it was a huge, and I once I stopped working in the media industry, I didn't go back, and I created also my own thing. And so they're all now catching up with this whole DEI stuff. Now they're all talking about diversity. And I'm like, dude, you're so far behind at this point, right? Because you were working in a silo. You were just working in that space. And actually, you're part of the problem because you perpetuated, this white Latino, you know, narrative, right? Of that's the good, and also the Spanish only narrative too. So you were always they perpetuated this idea of like a separate country within the country, right? And that was actually part of the pitch when they went to pitch for big business with P&G and Unilever and all of these liquor companies. It was like, oh, you need to hire us, right? Because we are going to service the country within a country. You don't know how many times I said that, when I was working for these publications, you know what I'm saying? And so, and now, and is whining and crying because they're like, ah, pero no, they're not thinking about us. We're part, we're black and brown too. Bueno, yeah, but then you need to catch up, because the black and brown movement is coming from people like you guys, right? That's more organic, more authentic, more in line with grassroots movements, that is really more interested about social impact and purpose than making a buck. That's
And
it.
that was part of our ethos in the magazine as well. When we started it, we our first language is Spanish, and we love speaking in Spanish. But we also have English in our mind. Sometimes Felipe and I speak in English. So we thought about that, and we actually did some research as to what is the number, like what was the division of languages in Orlando, and it was very split, like 50-50, like 50% of speak Spanish only, 50% speak only English, or feel but more ease with English. So it's like things aren't like they were in the 80s or in the 90s anymore. Things have changed a lot. So as we stay here, and as we continue to grow up in this country, and set our roots, we become Americans. And so we also, Hispanics aren't just white, Hispanics just in Spanish. Everything is, we're a duality, and that's what we had in mind when we started this magazine. We also wrote it. We also write content in English because we know that some Hispanics prefer only English.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
but they identify themselves as Hispanic. So
Yeah.
it's
And so
interesting.
I wonder. I haven't seen Telemundo and Univision lately, and I don't want to criticize them, but I don't remember the last time I saw a black presenter or something like that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So they're perpetuating it, right? I think they might be
I
getting better.
remember
But
Marisol
again,
Medina.
yeah, but they're
Cancel Perro is a Colombian black presenter in Telemundo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Been there for a while.
I've never seen
Yeah.
it, but that what I remember is I've never seen like the mixed race happening there, but it's a necessary. It's so necessary to start really integrating the community, because or else we're just falling into this North American apartheid that exists and nobody really talks about,
Yeah.
and everybody just kind of takes for granted that that's how it should be, or that's how
Yeah.
it is. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's another
But
problem. That's
it
just another
takes
situation.
people to meet each other. I have to thank Juliana, no, for inviting me to this thing, because we got to meet each other. And there's an opportunity here. We'll talk offline, because actually anyway, there's an opportunity that I think we can work on and it's about that, right? Is finding people that are willing to take a chance, grab your hands, close your eyes, and jump off that cliff, right? And create something new. Knowing that you have the capacity, the intellect, the know-how, the talent, right? And the network to be able to, ignore what they're doing over there, right? Because we're trying to create something new here that is of substance, and that, hopefully helps move the needle, right? So I thank you both for joining us today. And this was just I just feel like there's so many topics that we can explore together, and so hopefully this won't be the first time that we do this. Okay.
Read the magazine before
Yeah, show us the latest cover. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
so
Thank you so
that
much.
was the edition last month, and this one is this month's edition.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
celebrating
Yeah,
24 editions strong. Yeah, over
yeah.
here, I think you're around here.
Oh yeah,
From that
Should
get
be around here some.
together.
that's where you are.
Yes, I saw it. Thank you. That's from the get. See, so this is great. We just came full circle. Thank you so much, guys. And I hope you have a great rest of the week and a good weekend. Okay.
Thank you, Sami.
All right,
Thank you
no,
for
thank
inviting.
you for having us.
Thank you for being a beacon of the voices of Hispanics in Central Florida. And thank you for being.
Yes, absolutely. And say hi to Arturo.
There he is.
Hola. Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend. Okay.
Very good.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.